Welcome back to Real Life Documentary, a channel that tells you real-life tragic stories. Please support us by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos and commenting on them. Now to today's episode. In the heart of the idyllic Stonebridge community, the Lawrence residence had long been a symbol of stability and elegance. The Lawrence sisters, Isolde and Celeste, were well-known figures in the neighborhood, admired for their grace, intelligence, and the strong bond they shared. Isolde, the elder by 2 years, was a sharp-minded and ambitious corporate lawyer, while her sister Celeste, a free-spirited artist, balanced Isolde's intensity with her easy charm and infectious laughter. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with, both admired and envied by their neighbors. However, the peaceful equilibrium of Stonebridge was destined to be disrupted with the arrival of Oller Thorne. With his enigmatic charm and worldly sophistication, Oller moved into the long-empty Halley house next door to the Lawrences on a warm June evening. The residents of Stonebridge had no idea that his arrival would trigger a series of events leading to tragedy, forever altering the fabric of their serene community. As the summer days grew hotter, so did the rivalry between Isolde and Celeste. The once unbreakable bond between the sisters began to unravel, corroded by jealousy and desire. What started as a playful competition soon escalated into a deadly game, with Oller as the unwitting prize and Stonebridge as the backdrop for a chilling tale of betrayal. The Lawrence family had deep roots in Stonebridge, their history intertwined with the town's founding, tracing back 4 generations. The Lawrence parents raised their daughters, Isolde and Celeste, with a unique blend of old-money elegance and new-age philosophies. This upbringing resulted in 2 distinctly different, yet equally captivating young women. From the moment she was born, Isolde seemed destined for greatness. She inherited her father's sharp intellect and her mother's relentless determination, and she excelled in everything she undertook. By the age of 32, Isolde had already become a partner at Stonebridge's most prestigious law firm, her name spoken with a mix of admiration and intimidation in courtrooms across the state. Isolde's life was a meticulously crafted tower of accomplishments and accolades. Her wardrobe was filled with impeccably tailored suits, her social calendar was packed with charity galas and networking events, and her romantic relationships were brief and calculated. To the outside world, Isolde Lawrence embodied success. However, those who knew her well sensed an underlying restlessness, a yearning that no professional achievement could seem to satisfy. In contrast, Celeste Lawrence came into the world on a midsummer's night, her birth marked by a dramatic thunderstorm. From a young age, Celeste possessed an otherworldly charm that drew people to her like moths to a flame. Her laughter could lift the heaviest of spirits, and her vibrant, emotive paintings, which seemed to capture the very essence of joy, were displayed in galleries throughout the region. At 30, Celeste's life was a whirlwind of color and sensation. She moved from one passion project to the next, leaving behind a trail of unfinished masterpieces and broken hearts. Where Isolde was all sharp angles and cool precision, Celeste was soft curves and warm spontaneity. Her bohemian style and carefree attitude clashed with Stonebridge's conservative atmosphere, yet Celeste managed to charm even the most rigid neighbors with her genuine warmth and infectious enthusiasm. Despite their differences, or perhaps because of them, Isolde and Celeste had always been inseparable. They balanced each other perfectly. Isolde provided the stability and focus that Celeste sometimes lacked, while Celeste added a spark of spontaneity to Isolde's regimented life. Their sisterly bond seemed unbreakable, which made the events that followed all the more shocking to those who knew them. As children, they were co-conspirators in backyard adventures and confidants during teenage trials. As adults, they remained each other's fiercest defenders and most trusted allies. Neither sister could have imagined that anything or anyone could ever come between them, but fate had other plans. The arrival of Oller Thorne in Stonebridge was like a stone dropped into still waters, sending ripples of curiosity and excitement through the community. He appeared one day in early June, driving a sleek black Audi that purred down Maple Street with feline grace. As he stepped out of the car, the neighborhood watch, a group of retirees who spent their days observing the comings and goings of Stonebridge from their porch swings, leaned forward in unison, eager to catch a glimpse of their new neighbor. Oller did not disappoint. At 35, he cut a striking figure, his presence almost cinematic, as if he had stepped out of a noir film and into the technicolor world of Stonebridge. Rumors about Aller's past spread through the community like wildfire. Some speculated that he was a tech millionaire taking a sabbatical from Silicon Valley, while others whispered that he was a novelist seeking inspiration for his next bestseller. The truth, however, was just as intriguing. Aller Thorne was a former war correspondent turned humanitarian aid worker who had spent the last decade traveling through global hotspots. Stonebridge, he claimed, was to be his refuge, a place to heal and write his memoirs. The Lawrence sisters first encountered Aller separately, and each meeting left a lasting impression. Isolde, out for her morning run, nearly collided with him as he emerged from the local coffee shop. Their eyes met over the rim of his steaming cup, and for a moment, Isolde felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her physical exertion. Celeste's introduction came later that same day. As she was setting up her easel in the park, Aller, exploring his new surroundings, stopped to admire her work. His insightful comments on her use of color left Celeste both flattered and intrigued. Neither sister realized, as they recounted their encounters over dinner that night, that they had just met the man who would change their lives forever. The seeds of rivalry between Isolde and Celeste were planted innocuously enough, nurtured by the subtle competition that had always existed between them. At first, their growing interest in Aller manifested in small ways. Isolde began taking her morning runs past his house more frequently, while Celeste found reasons to paint in the park near his regular walking route. As the summer progressed, both sisters found themselves unconsciously vying for Aller's attention. Isolde, typically reserved in social settings, made an effort to engage Aller in intellectual discussions whenever they crossed paths. She would captivate him with stories of her most challenging legal cases, her gray eyes sparkling with passion as she delved into the complexities of corporate law. To her delight, Aller proved to be an attentive and insightful listener, often drawing parallels between her legal battles and the geopolitical conflicts he had witnessed in his past. Celeste, meanwhile, approached Aller with her characteristic warmth and spontaneity. She invited him to local art exhibitions, introducing him to Stonebridge's small but vibrant creative community. On lazy Sunday afternoons, she would often spot him reading on his porch and eagerly join him, sketchbook in hand, to share her latest inspiration or convince him to pose as her impromptu model. Aller, for his part, seemed to genuinely enjoy the company of both sisters, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension between them. With Isolde, he found a kindred intellectual spirit, someone who could match his wit and challenge his perspectives. With Celeste, he rediscovered a sense of joy and wonder that years of witnessing human suffering had nearly extinguished. The rivalry between the sisters might have remained friendly, a mere undercurrent in their relationship, had it not been for the annual Stonebridge Summer Gala. The event, a black tie affair held at the town's historic mansion, was the social highlight of the season. Isolde and Celeste had always attended together, presenting a united front amidst Stonebridge's elite. However, this year, each sister extended a separate invitation to Aller. When Aller arrived at the gala, looking dashing in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the Lawrence sisters' faces fell in unison. He greeted them both warmly, seemingly unaware of the silent battle of wills unfolding before him. As the evening at the gala progressed, Isolde and Celeste took turns monopolizing Aller's attention, each trying to outshine the other. Isolde dazzled him with her extensive knowledge of wine, guiding him through a tasting with the expertise of a seasoned sommelier. Not to be outdone, Celeste swept Aller onto the dance floor, her natural grace making even his awkward steps seem charming. By the end of the night, a palpable tension had settled between the sisters as they watched Aller drive away, each lost in her own thoughts. They both realized that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The easy camaraderie they had always shared was now tinged with an edge of competition, a silent acknowledgement that they had become rivals in the pursuit of Aller Thorne's affections. As summer gave way to autumn, the rivalry between Isolde and Celeste intensified. Every interaction with Aller became a calculated move in an increasingly complex game. The sisters, once inseparable, now found reasons to spend time apart, each hoping to encounter Aller alone. Isolde, ever the strategist, began orchestrating chance meetings with Aller. She adjusted her schedule to coincide with his daily routines, casually bumping into him at the local farmer's market or the quaint bookstore on Main Street. During these encounters, she would engage him in deep conversations about his experiences in war-torn countries, drawing parallels to her own battles in the courtroom. Isolde's keen intellect and sophisticated charm seemed to resonate with Aller, and she reveled in the moments when his eyes would light up with interest at her insights. Celeste, sensing her sister's strategic moves, responded with her own form of allure. She invited Aller to spontaneous picnics in the park, her basket filled with homemade delicacies that highlighted her culinary skills. Under the dappled shade of oak trees, she regaled him with vivid stories of her travels through Europe's art scenes. Her animated gestures and melodious laughter were a stark contrast to Isolde's more reserved demeanor. Celeste's free spirit and zest for life seemed to awaken something in Aller, a yearning for the simple joys he had set aside during his years of global wandering. The rivalry between the sisters began to affect other areas of their lives. Isolde, who had always been focused on her career, suddenly developed an interest in community events, volunteering for the same charitable causes that Aller supported. Meanwhile, Celeste, typically content with her bohemian lifestyle, started discussing ambitions to get her art into more prestigious galleries, knowing that Aller appreciated drive and ambition. Their friends and neighbors in Stonebridge watched this transformation with a mix of fascination and concern. The once harmonious Lawrence sisters were now prone to thinly veiled jabs and one-upmanship, their interactions charged with an unmistakable undercurrent of rivalry. The situation reached a climax at the Stonebridge Autumn Festival, where both sisters had taken on significant roles in organizing the event, each hoping to impress Aller with their community spirit. Isolde had meticulously planned the logistics, ensuring every detail was flawless. Celeste had handled the artistic aspects, designing stunning decorations that transformed the town square into a harvest wonderland. As Aller strolled through the festival, admiring both sisters for their hard work, Isolde and Celeste flanked him, each vying for his attention. When Aller praised a particularly striking centerpiece, Celeste quickly claimed credit, shooting a triumphant glance at Isolde. In retaliation, Isolde smoothly redirected the conversation towards the flawless execution of the event, subtly highlighting her own contributions. The tension between them escalated throughout the evening, culminating in a heated argument behind the catering tent. Their raised voices drew concerned looks from passers-by, and even Aller, finally noticing the strain between the sisters, attempted to intervene. His presence only fueled their anger further, with each accusing the other of trying to monopolize his time. As the festival wound down, Isolde and Celeste departed separately, abandoning their usual joint ride home. Aller was left standing alone, a puzzled expression on his face as he began to grasp the depth of the conflict he had inadvertently sparked between the Lawrence sisters. The turning point in their rivalry came on a crisp October evening during Stonebridge's annual charity auction. Held in the grand ballroom of the Stonebridge Country Club, the event was a glittering affair that drew the town's most prominent citizens. Isolde and Celeste arrived separately, each a vision in designer evening wear, their eyes scanning the crowd for a glimpse of Aller. When Aller finally appeared, looking dashing in a classic black tuxedo, both sisters made their move. They converged on him from opposite sides of the room, their forced smiles barely concealing their competitive intent. Aller, now acutely aware of the tension between them, attempted to greet both equally, but the atmosphere was charged with unspoken hostility. As the auction began, Isolde and Celeste found themselves engaged in a silent bidding war. The item up for bid was a weekend getaway for two at an exclusive mountain resort, an opportunity that both sisters viewed as a chance to spend uninterrupted time with Aller. What started as a reasonable bid quickly escalated as Isolde and Celeste raised their paddles with increasing frequency. The other attendees watched in astonishment as the price soared far beyond the package's value. Aller, realizing that the bidding was more about him than the prize, tried to intervene, but his protest was ignored. The sisters were too absorbed in their competition to notice his discomfort. In the end, Celeste emerged victorious with a final bid that elicited a collective gasp from the crowd. As the auctioneer's gavel fell, Celeste turned to Isolde with a triumphant smirk, only to see her sister's face masked in cold fury. Isolde, typically the picture of composure, was visibly shaking with rage. In that moment, something in Isolde's eyes hardened, a darkness that sent a chill down Celeste's spine. Without a word, Isolde turned on her heel and stormed out of the ballroom, leaving a trail of whispers in her wake. Aller, witnessing this exchange, finally understood the full extent of the sisters' rivalry. He approached Celeste, his face etched with concern, and gently suggested that it might be best if he kept his distance from both of them for a while. Celeste, her victory now feeling hollow, could only nod mutely as she watched him walk away. As the evening drew to a close, the residents of Stonebridge buzzed with speculation about the Lawrence sisters' very public falling out. Little did they know that this was merely the prelude to a much darker chapter in their story. In the days following the charity auction, Isolde retreated into herself, abandoning her usual routines in favor of long hours spent alone in her home office. To the outside world it seemed that she was simply nursing her wounded pride, but within the confines of her mind, a sinister plan was taking shape. Isolde had always prided herself on her self-control, her ability to compartmentalize emotions and approach problems with cool logic. But the humiliation of losing to Celeste, coupled with the fear of losing Aller, had cracked her carefully constructed facade. For the first time in her life, Isolde found herself entertaining thoughts that both thrilled and terrified her. Initially, these thoughts were relatively innocuous, visions of Celeste falling ill or encountering some minor misfortune that would keep her away from Aller. However, as days wore on, fueled by sleepless nights and an increasing sense of desperation, Isolde's imagination took a darker turn. She began to contemplate scenarios in which Celeste was permanently removed from the equation. These thoughts, initially shocking in their intensity, gradually became more palatable as Isolde's mind worked to justify them. She convinced herself that Celeste had always been the favored sister, effortlessly capturing attention and affection, while Isolde had to work tirelessly for every scrap of recognition. In her distorted reasoning, Isolde began to see Celeste not just as a rival for Aller's affections, but as the embodiment of everything she had ever resented in life. Every setback, every disappointment, every moment of self-doubt that Isolde had endured, she now attributed to Celeste's mere existence. The turning point came on a rain-soaked evening as Isolde sat in her darkened living room, a glass of wine in hand. Through the window she spotted Celeste and Aller sharing an umbrella, their heads bent close in intimate conversation. At that moment something snapped inside Isolde. The last vestiges of sisterly affection crumbled away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. It was then that the idea of an accident first took root in her mind, an unfortunate incident that would rid her of Celeste once and for all, clearing the path to Aller. As lightning illuminated the room, Isolde allowed herself a small, chilling smile. After all, she was an expert at constructing airtight cases. Surely she could craft the perfect crime. With the decision made, Isolde threw herself into planning with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her a formidable lawyer. She approached the task of eliminating her sister with the clinical detachment of a chess player plotting several moves ahead. Her first step was to establish an alibi. Isolde began to cultivate a more visible presence in the community, volunteering at the local animal shelter and joining a book club. She made a point of being seen and heard, creating a network of witnesses who could vouch for her whereabouts and character. Simultaneously, she embarked on a careful study of Celeste's routines, all under the guise of reconciliation. Isolde began to spend more time with her sister, meticulously noting her habits, schedule, and most importantly, her vulnerabilities. She paid particular attention to Celeste's daily jog through Stonebridge Park, a solitary ritual Celeste had maintained for years. Isolde's research extended beyond observing her sister. She spent hours poring over medical journals and forensic reports to learn about accidents that could appear natural yet be orchestrated. She became an expert in the effects of various substances, their detectability, and their ability to mimic natural causes of death. To cover her tracks, Isolde used public computers at the local library for her more questionable searches, always careful to clear the browsing history afterward. She made discreet purchases from different stores across town, accumulating the materials she would need without raising suspicion. As her plan crystallized, Isolde encountered several close calls that threatened to derail her scheme. Once, while mixing a concoction in her garage, a neighbor dropped by unexpectedly. Isolde managed to conceal her work just in time, her heart pounding as she chatted casually over coffee. On another occasion, Celeste nearly discovered a notebook where Isolde had jotted down some incriminating notes. Isolde managed to snatch it away, passing it off as a draft for a sensitive legal case. This incident served as a stark reminder of the need for absolute caution. Despite these near misses, Isolde's resolve never wavered. If anything, the close calls only sharpened her focus and refined her plan. She became adept at maintaining a facade of normalcy, playing the role of the dutiful sister and respected community member, while secretly orchestrating Celeste's demise. As the weeks turned into months, Iselda's scheme became a meticulously crafted plan, each aspect carefully designed and re-evaluated multiple times. It was no longer a matter of whether she would proceed, but when the perfect moment would arise. That moment finally appeared on the eve of the annual Stonebridge Marathon, an event Celeste had eagerly participated in for years. With a grim sense of satisfaction, Iselda recognized that everything was in place for her carefully staged accident to occur. The morning of the Stonebridge Marathon dawned clear and bright, an ideal day for running. Iselda woke early, her nerves buzzing with a mix of anticipation and dread. She followed her morning routine with mechanical precision, each step deliberately planned to solidify her alibi. By 7:30 a.m., Iselda was at the marathon starting line, clipboard in hand. She had secured a position as a race coordinator months earlier, ensuring she had a visible role throughout the day's events. She greeted her fellow volunteers with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, her gaze constantly scanning the crowd for a sign of Celeste. Celeste arrived at 8:15 a.m., waving enthusiastically at Iselda. The tension between them seemed to have faded in the excitement of the pre-race atmosphere. Iselda waved back, her stomach turning as she considered what was about to happen. As Celeste began her warm-up, Iselda made her way to the water station at the 5-mile mark, where she had been assigned to hand out refreshments to the runners. This position was pivotal to her plan. It allowed her to be seen by many witnesses while still giving her access to the race route. At precisely 9 a.m., the starting gun fired, and Iselda watched as the crowd of runners surged forward, her eyes locked on Celeste's fading figure. Taking a deep breath, she then focused on her task, handing out cups of water with robotic efficiency. At 9:47 a.m., Iselda excused herself, claiming she needed a bathroom break. Instead, she hurried to a secluded spot along the race route, just before a sharp turn leading into a wooded area. Here she retrieved a small vial from her pocket and carefully spread its contents, a nearly invisible, highly slippery substance, across a section of the path. She then returned to her post, resuming her role with a pounding heart as she anxiously awaited Celeste's arrival. At 10:23 a.m., Iselda spotted her sister rounding the bend toward the water station. Celeste was making good time, her face set with determination as she reached for a cup. Their eyes met briefly as Iselda handed her the water, and in that moment a flicker of doubt crossed Iselda's mind, a final vestige of sisterly affection crying out in protest. But it was too late to turn back. Celeste continued, unaware of what awaited her. Iselda watched, her breath catching in her throat as her sister neared the treacherous patch of ground. Time seemed to slow as Celeste's foot hit the slippery surface. The accident unfolded just as Iselda had planned. Celeste's foot slipped, her ankle twisting at a grotesque angle. Her momentum sent her careening off the path and down a steep embankment. The sound of snapping branches and a stifled cry echoed through the woods, followed by an ominous silence. Iselda stood frozen as the reality of what she had done washed over her. Then, snapping back to her senses, she raised the alarm, her cries for help convincingly real. As fellow volunteers and paramedics rushed to the scene, Iselda played the role of the distraught sister to perfection, her eyes filled with tears that were not entirely faked. As Celeste's motionless body was carefully placed onto a stretcher, Iselda felt a strange blend of horror and relief. The deed was done, and now all that remained was to see her plan through to its bitter end. The news of Celeste Lawrence's tragic accident sent shockwaves through Stonebridge. The vibrant artist, beloved by many, had suffered severe head trauma and multiple fractures in her fall. She lingered in a coma for 3 days before succumbing to her injuries, leaving the community in mourning and disbelief. The initial investigation into Celeste's death was cursory. Given the public nature of the event and the presence of numerous witnesses, the police were inclined to view it as a tragic accident. Iselda's performance as the grief-stricken sister was flawless, her composed exterior cracking just enough to reveal glimpses of raw emotion that seemed genuine to all who saw her. In the days following Celeste's funeral, a somber affair attended by what seemed like the entire town, Iselda immersed herself in managing her sister's estate. She handled the responsibilities with her usual efficiency, all the while maintaining the facade of a grieving sibling. However, the first thread in Iselda's carefully woven tapestry of deception began to unravel 6 months after Celeste's death. Amelia Thornton, a junior associate at Iselda's law firm, was tasked with organizing old case files when she stumbled upon a peculiar notebook hidden among Iselda's papers. Curiosity piqued, Amelia flipped through its pages, her eyes widening as she realized the sinister nature of its contents. The notebook contained detailed notes on various poisons and their effects, along with what appeared to be a meticulously planned timeline. Although no names were mentioned, the final date chillingly corresponded with the day of Celeste's fatal accident. Unsure of what to do with this information, Amelia confided in her boyfriend, Detective Lucas Reeves. Reeves, a by-the-book officer who had always felt uneasy about the quick resolution of Celeste's case, saw this as an opportunity to reopen the investigation. He began by quietly re-examining the evidence, paying close attention to details that had been overlooked during the initial inquiry. A breakthrough came when Reeves interviewed Martin Holloway, a retired chemist who lived near the accident site. Holloway recalled seeing Iselda near the wooded area shortly before Celeste's fall, despite Iselda's insistence that she had been at the water station the entire time. This discrepancy, coupled with the suspicious notebook, was enough for Reeves to dig deeper. As the investigation progressed, more inconsistencies in Iselda's story came to light. Security camera footage from a nearby convenience store showed Iselda purchasing unusual combinations of chemicals in the weeks leading up to the marathon. Additionally, a forensic re-examination of Celeste's running shoes revealed traces of an artificial polymer designed to reduce friction, a substance that had no place on a running trail. Perhaps the most damning piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Aller Thorne, overwhelmed with guilt over his role in the sisters' rivalry, came forward with a series of text messages from Iselda. The messages, sent in the heat of their competition for his affections, revealed an animosity toward Celeste that bordered on obsession. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, the true picture of what had happened on that fateful day began to emerge, and Iselda's carefully constructed alibi started to crumble under the weight of the mounting evidence. The final blow came during a search of Iselda's home office. Hidden behind a false panel in her desk, detectives discovered a vial containing traces of the same polymer found on Celeste's shoes, along with detailed notes outlining the plan to stage an accident during the marathon. Faced with the overwhelming evidence against her, Iselda's composure finally shattered. In a moment of desperation, she attempted to flee, leading police on a tense car chase through the streets of Stonebridge. The pursuit ended at the very spot where Celeste had fallen, with Iselda's car skidding off the road in a cruel twist of irony. As she was led away in handcuffs, the mask of the grieving sister fell away completely. The residents of Stonebridge watched in shock as Iselda Lawrence, once a pillar of their community, was revealed to be the architect of her own sister's demise. Her arrest and subsequent confession sent shockwaves through the town, shattering its idyllic image and forcing its residents to confront the darkness that had lurked beneath the surface of their community. The courtroom drama unfolded like a twisted reflection of Iselda's legal career, with the once respected lawyer now sitting at the defendant's table. Her impassioned plea of temporary insanity, citing the extreme emotional stress of her rivalry with Celeste, fell on deaf ears. The jury, composed of many who had once admired her, took less than a day to return a guilty verdict. Iselda was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.